Good morning.
Good morning. And how are you this fine
Good,
fall
good, good.
morning?
Good. It's
Uh,
uh, it's sunny here in Thunder Bay, but my wife tells me we're supposed to get snow tomorrow.
well, I guess it's that time of year.
Yeah,
You gotta.
that's why I told her. It's the time of the year when we get a dusting of snow and then goes away next day. So,
I actually, this is my favorite season. Fall is my favorite season.
yeah, me too. Uh,
Hmm.
Always was and always will be. I go hunting and all the moose hunting and all that kind of stuff. So we
Nice. And then
we
you spend
really,
time with us too.
yeah, we spend time with my boys, and we go hunting, and we sit around a fire and talk about all kinds of things,
Yeah.
and evenings, and we spent about a week doing that. Quite it's quite something that's very very how to put it. I don't know how we could do it better, but it always seems that the last day of the hunt, that's when we get a moose. Every year like that. So we work hard to get one, and then when we get one, it's the last day, and we work even harder because we're coming home then.
The last day. So then you should make the last day the first day. So just say you're going to go up
Yeah,
for one day. You're just going to
good
go up for one day.
idea. Good idea.
You'll get it.
Yeah, because we talk about saying what happened those days when we used to come in the bush and shoot a moose right away. I don't know what happened, but we really enjoy it, and we
Your speaker is not working. Så vi hadde gå an til vinduet.
Hello, Carol? Can you hear us, Carol? Can everybody hear us?
Yeah.
Oh,
This is faint sound. She has no sound. Carol.
oh, Carol has no sound.
No.
Oh,
oh
okay. It's got to be her speaker then.
Yeah.
Well, okay. We'll get started. It's 10 after 10. Minot Kajep, good morning, everybody. Great to see everyone joining us again this morning. Yeah, just, I want to just say Miigwech Bentley yesterday gave us a lot of great historical perspective on treaties and serving some reminders about the importance of treaties, the impact of treaties. Basically, thinking about it, it's really put simply, a treaty is just the way you treat each other. It's that agreement, right? And sometimes they work and sometimes they don't. And unfortunately, we're at points where, our people have to fight, for the treatment that, was promised, but it's not there. And, it's been hundreds of years in some cases, right? That we're still at this point of continuing to struggle, face the challenges and fight. So having this insight on the background, it really is helping me as a communications person, because we need to communicate messages on a regular basis, especially recently with 1850 Robinson Huron Treaty and providing opportunities for our band members to gain more insight into treaties from historical as well, modern day perspectives, and what has been and what we need to do. So Miigwech for bringing us there yesterday, and you will be continuing that with us today with our 10 o'clock session this morning as well this afternoon. So on that note, I will welcome you back to our virtual session with our community members. Bentley, I'll open it up for you. Miigwech.
okay, very good, Carrie. Um, yesterday we talked about well, I talked about different events that took us up toward the treaty making process. in Canada, how the events that took place to get it there. What I'll be talking about this afternoon and this morning and this afternoon is some of the final events that took place to like the Treaty of Niagara of 1764. That was the beginning of the treaty making process. In that process, the agreements that were reached had a very profound effect on the treaty making process. As I indicated yesterday, that in sort of a recap a bit about what took place and what do you call it, what happened back in the day. In North America at that time, the effect of what you call it, the 7 Years' War in North America, because it wasn't what you call it just North America. It was world. So it's a worldwide, what do you call it? It was a worldwide war that took place not only here, but also in Europe and India and all those places. North America essentially had two separate settlers from Britain and settlers from France. And at first, when the 7 Years' War came to an end in the Treaty of Paris in 1763, at first the British wanted the French settlers in Quebec to establish English customs, to accept them. The laws in that, what do you call it, in the Upper Canada were written the laws were written in the Lower Canada, and then it became the norm for Upper Canada. They're written in English without any consideration for the French settlers. Only spoke French. Most of them only spoke French. And the French settlers that were in Canada after the Treaty of Paris were not allowed to hold jobs in the government. So this caused a lot of friction. And this is how you got the British to create a law called the Quebec Act, and which gave people in Quebec the freedom of religion and the right to use some French laws. And this was the beginning of Canada as a bilingual, what do you call it, bicultural nation. It also changed the relationship between Britain and Indigenous people living in what would become Canada, because you had upper and lower Canada. Now that would be formed into a country in 1867, and then going forward from there. After the war, King George III then as I indicated, and we talked a bit about that, issued the Royal Proclamation. That piece of legislation said that any land Britain did not control could, in North America, they did not control any in North America, belonged to the indigenous people. Only the British government could buy the land and negotiate with indigenous people. Now, buying the land is separate from from negotiating with the people. And that was the treaty making process. That's where the treaty really began. The law or the proclamation is still an essential to the government, to the government of Canada in its relationship with today's indigenous people. The interpretation of the treaty sometimes as Murray Sinclair said, it exists and sometimes it doesn't exist. It depends what it would do. It was designed for Native people that you could get control of your lands and control of your lives and control of your destiny. But that never happened. So therefore, the things that were put in place, sometimes with good intention, but the results were not all that favorable for Aboriginal people. There's a lot of issues that came about in their attempt to implement a life of coexistence with amongst each other. Most historians consider 7 years was very vital because it created what Canada is today. And sometimes when you interpret that, sometimes it, in content, whether it's legislation or whatever, or promises or whatever, the promises and what actually happened is very different. And that's why today we have a lot of we spend lots of time as Aboriginal people trying to protect what we know should be ours and what others assume we should have and what we actually have. We always in conflict with each other. I don't know if you people know, but Canada is in the world spends more money to protect itself from Aboriginal belief that this land still belongs to Aboriginal people. Spends lots of money in protecting itself from doing that. So it's those are things that are still out there that we have to resolve. Governments today are coming forward and saying, well, maybe we should look at how we can resolve these issues. The problem sometimes that we have is how that gets done. The government want to resolve issues. And I honestly don't know whether they can do it any other way, but they said under the Constitution of Canada. I don't know whether the government can do it any other way, because Canada cannot develop laws and go against its own laws in settling issues with what do you call it, with Aboriginal people or anybody else. Because as a sovereign, they assume that responsibility of creating, if you will, the government has a sacred responsibility in protecting the laws of the country. They cannot break them. And sometimes when we look at it, we wonder whether you like waking up and saying that this thing is not working the way it's supposed to work. Well, that is what we have today in Canada. Now, as I said, Canada is coming to the table saying, we would like to reconcile our differences. And they talk about it from a treaty perspective. I know that some of the, I'm quite aware of some of the discussions that are going on. I know because we had those discussions under Treaty 9. We have those same kind of discussions, and with Canada. But as we move forward, as we all move forward, because we have different objectives within each different treaty, how we settle those things is going to be contingent upon accepting the fact that we are doing it under the Constitution of Canada. So any agreement that is reached in what do you call it, with the government, no matter who you are, it's going to have to be done under the Constitution of Canada. And so it's not, I wouldn't say, it's not a bad thing, because the agreement has to have some credence of some kind of that it become law or whatever, that it stands on its own. So, but where you have to be do some due diligent work is in the treaty itself, and some of us read the treaty, and some of us don't understand what it means. Some of us get very upset and say, "Well, okay, well, this really they really took us to the cleaners on this one," and so on and so forth. But the government is receptive to sitting down and saying, let's sit down, let's find a way how we can move forward. So this happens in any negotiation, okay? In any negotiation that I've been involved in, the other party always comes in and try to lowball you, and try to give you the least that they can to make it work. Well, we have to do our work. We have to do our homework, and we have to say, no, this is not the way it's going to work, or whatever, without having any fear of repercussion of any kind against our people. that we go there with an attitude that is, what do you call it, represents what the people like to see happen. You know, it is interesting because I had a discussion with one of the elders in the Sinabiaski Nation. He passed on now. His name was Louis Oswald. He's from the Aboriginal First Nation, or how to say, known in English, Port Hope in the 39 area. Louis told me, he said, no, we have to look for a way how we can move forward and settle our differences with the government. And when you want to do that, he said, you have to take everything into consideration. It's not as just simple to go there and say, you owe me $15 billion. No. He said, that's not how it should work. How it should work is that some of our monies, whether we want it or not, some of our money that have derived economies, or that have put a number of what they call things in place to employ people or whatever, tax systems and whatever. Some of those, he said, built some hospitals. They built highways, just to name a couple of things, he said. We have to consider that when we're talking about how much does somebody owe us. Those things we all use. Like highways, we travel all over the place on the highway. It costs money to build that highway. We didn't build that. And what it did was it provided for me as an individual to look at things from a different perspective. And that was, I'm sure that was his intention. Louis didn't want me to go in a direction that's what they call it, just thinking about a number of things. One, not about just me personally getting some kind of settlement so I get some money. Because he said that's not what it's about. Yeah, maybe in the end you'll get money, that's fine. Everybody will get money, that's fine. But what are the things we're looking for going into the future? Where you have to, what you have to negotiate is, if we create an agreement, as an example, I don't know how many of you have heard about the Ring of Fire, where it's still going on today. It's about what they call it, the government dealing with a couple of First Nations. And the way that they do it is they have what they call, they're going to build a road. Going to build a road into the Ring of Fire. They don't want anybody else to own the road except themselves. They don't want the First Nations to own it. The government will own it. So what ends up happening is they read things into possibly making an agreement. They read things into it saying, well, if the First Nation owns the road, they can close it anytime they want, which cuts off any kind of commerce that would take place. That's how they think. They think from a perspective of, what do you call it, I'm not saying that's not true. That's probably true. That probably would happen because in the United States, way back when Reagan was, what do you call it? Reagan was president of the United States, and he wanted to cut off their legal services corporation that they had over there in the United States. And the people that owned the hydro dam on the Colorado River, the native people, which provided hydro to Los Angeles and California and all those places. They went to the president and said, "You're going to cut off what? You cut off our money?" Well, Mr. President, how about we cut off hydro to California? The negotiations kind of did not flip-flop. They kind of come to a standstill. All of a sudden, there's reality that you've got to deal with. And the reality is that you have to come together to come up with a solution that's going to work for everybody. So that's how it's moved forward. It moved forward from that. One of the things that's very important in doing that is that getting people in the community, and you're doing it, the education process, how the treaty works, how it's interpreted. I fought for many years how the government interprets the treaty. And the government interprets the treaty to its own benefit. And in doing so, they will protect that position, or in the event of any work that they do. But it's up to us to put that part of it into the right perspective. And the right perspective come from our people. And that's such what you're doing here. You're providing an education base for our people, your people, to understand what the treaty process is all about, from the good side to the bad side. You know, Murray Sinclair was very, 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 how would I say that? He's a nice guy. He was very nice about how he interpreted the Royal Proclamation, for example. You know, I cannot help but think about 4 or 5 individuals on a committee of people, maybe, from the British government, that sat around the table and put all this into place. What would happen if we did this? All of those things that happened, the wars and everything, that was all taken into consideration. And then come down saying, okay, we're here now we want to go in the future, and this is what we're going to do. You can almost see that taking place. And yet, when the war was over, and And our people were not included in the settlement as if we were, they passed by us. And they forgot all about us. When you heard it all. You say, just we're here right after 7 years war. Okay, let's do this for Aboriginal people. Royal Proclamation. Forget about what the Aboriginal people did for us. What role did the Aboriginal people play in what do you call it, Britain becoming a world power? Our people played a very significant role, and right after the war, they got what they wanted and forget about it. They made the Royal Proclamation, made all kinds of promises, and right after that, they forget. They forget all about us. They didn't. It's well, it's just like in passing. And that's why when you talk about what you call it, the history of it, and you know, Pontiac comes in. You know, when he was an Odawa chief, came in and said, "No, enough is enough. I'm not. I won't accept anymore about what you call it, promises that are being made to our people. I won't accept that anymore." So what ends up happening is that the government takes on a different strategy. The government brings in a strategy that they try to include everybody, but they couldn't. They couldn't bring everybody together. So what happened is what I'm going to be talking a little bit about today, and there's not all very much historical facts. I guess some of the things, and I know you having somebody going to talk about the wampum belts, and this is where the wampum belts come in. No, I'm not going to profess that I know a lot of things about the wampum belts. No, I don't. I know, like I've looked at some of the videos that are online that people have that have taken on the responsibility of explaining them to general public. But you have somebody there this week that is going to talk about the wampum belt, and I would like to very, very much participate in that to hear what it's all about. The treaty for Aboriginal people, the Treaty of Niagara of 1764 had a very significant impact on what the Royal Proclamation meant and what the treaty produced, the end results of that treaty. Now, this treaty was put together in the summer of 1764, and that is right after the Royal Proclamation. Sir William Johnson, he was the head of the Indian Department. That's a British Indian Affairs, if you will, I guess, British. That is what was developed so that they can deal and address issues with with the Aboriginal people. They, when the proclamation was enunciated by the by King George III, he immediately sent the contents of the Royal Proclamation to Aboriginal leaders in the area that he was working in, to inform them what the proclamation was all about. And the whole idea was not only to inform them, but that they accept the terms of the proclamation. And so this proclamation was turned into what how you create an alliance with the Aboriginal people in Canada, to create an alliance with the English, so that the discussion could go around, and after I would assume a few days, that was geared towards accepting the Royal Proclamation. And the Royal Proclamation, as I indicated yesterday, was one that the King, on behalf of England, became the sole protector of Indian people in North America. The Crown was the one that spoke around Aboriginal people. They controlled the land, allowing people to, what do you call it, allowing Aboriginal people to retain the areas where they were, and so on and so forth. And in that discussion, there was other things that took place. Treaty of Niagara. When it was finally decided that they're going to have this meeting, this Congress, or getting together, whatever, in July and August of 1764, they decided that there would be a meeting. And as I said, they were going to discuss the lines with the English, how that's going to look, and the acceptance of the Royal Proclamation, but also included land sessions, how land can be ceded. Those sessions was the beginning of the treaty process. That's where the treaty come in. And they also talked about the prisoners that were taken. You know, the prisoners in history, the Aboriginal prisoners or Native prisoners, whatever terminology we want to use, were not prisoners that did anything wrong with the British Crown. Those prisoners were prisoners that were doing wrong to their own people. And in that process, the people wanted to talk about those prisoners. And it doesn't even, in history, doesn't even refer to what happened in those discussions, those prisoners. It doesn't lay it out saying, okay, there was some, we don't even, it doesn't even identify how many there were. But it talked about it. And the other one was that how the British presence would be accepted in the Great Lakes area. Because there's got to be movement of some kind. And the reason for that is we call it, you could, there was not a process that would allow those discussions to be fruitful and achieve some results. Because there was, British were looking for a way how to get our people to agree. And it was to get our people to agree. It couldn't be, what do you call it, with couldn't be war, because Pontiac was already on a war path and captured some of the, I think, 9 out of 10 forts in the Niagara region. So this from the States to Canada, because there was no United States, there was actually no Canada yet at the time. But that treaty, the Treaty of Niagara, was recorded in wampum. And I'm not going to talk about that wampum because there are others that you have there to make presentations, say, well, okay, this is what the wampums meant. And I don't know, there's 2 or 3 or 4 of them or whatever. But in that whole process, there was a number of what they call wampums that were exchanged, recording the meetings that took place. I think there was already 4 of them altogether. But where those wampum belts are today, I don't know. I'm sure that the people that will present will identify where the wampum belts are. A lot of our people look at the 1764 as the Treaty of Niagara, which is not recognized, by the way, by the government. You can draw your own conclusions. I'm sure that there was a reason for it. In many cases, if anything went in favor of what you call it, Aboriginal people, they lost in the, what do you call it, in the shuffling of paper within the government. And you can't even get government people to talk about it. They are told to take the position that government doesn't recognize 1764 Treaty of Niagara. So, but our First Nations, and there was 24 of them, and there was 2,000 people in the meetings that took place. in the Treaty of Niagara. There's 24 communities or villages or whatever that were represented. We look at the Treaty of Niagara as the foundation of our relationship with Canada. Canada doesn't recognize, as I said, the Treaty of Niagara. Treaty of Niagara is something that it's in wampum. The governing chain of wampum presented by Sir William Johnson at the conclusion of the Council of what they call it, Niagara. And it shows, Wampum Bill showed that there's two people in the middle. And I would assume that's probably Native people and Aboriginal people. And 1764 is written on it across that Wampum Bill. So you can't, for our people, that meant something. But because it meant something to our people, the government conveniently or by omission doesn't recognize that. I'm going to go back to with the conquest of New France in 1760. The Battle of, what do you call it, the Plains of Abraham and the Battle of Quebec City, Montreal, all those things. Britain needed to create a policy that would ensure peaceful settlement and relations with First Nation. And that's what that's how the Treaty of Niagara came about. And because the First Nation, First Nation continued the conflict with the British by taking multiple ports. See, I'm going back to what you call it now, Pontiac. And there was, Aboriginal people did a lot of horrible things, apparently. Some historians. They killed children, they killed a woman, they scalped all the men. They were savages, we were hostile. They were talking about the fact that we were protecting what is rightfully ours. What was given to us by the Creator. That's all we were doing. But when they kill people, that's a victory. That's conquest. That's how it is. They projected themselves. Human history projects that. And through that, what ended up happening was that the government, in their wisdom, I'll say, for lack of terminology, decided to outline what are some of the things they were going to do, some policy. And these policies are outlined in the Royal Proclamation. It was to create that shield for Aboriginal people from the outside world, which it did not. Some of the things that happened within that, what do you call it, the Royal Proclamation, are used by other governments to circumvent or to not circumvent, but to establish policies that would keep Aboriginal people down. And this is where the Indian Act comes in. So all those things, every step of the evolution, if I may call it, had a lot of consequences, more consequences than good things for Aboriginal people. And when the things happened, they were carried out by Sir William Johnson. Sort of like the one that put the colonial policy of the British government in place. They started telling us what to do, how to live, how to do anything their way. It was always their way. Totally forgetting that we had lived here for thousands of years and we had our way of doing things. That we were not we were not stupid. We had a language, we had a culture, and we had the land. Those are the basic elements that are required in order for you to be under the UN Charter, to be self-governing or self-determining. As the North America was becoming a place where, what do you call it, a place where there was a lot of discontent, especially when with the American colonists, they started to question Britain's what do you call it, Britain's presence and what Britain wanted to do. As a result of that, you have what do you call it, the American Revolution that took place. And in the 1764, the Treaty of Niagara was being contemplated. They were looking at the aircraft Iroquois Confederation. They asked the Iroquois Confederation, pardon me, if they could hold council. Because if you recall in history, the Iroquois Confederacy was in support of the British, we call it British Crown during what do you call it, many of the wars that took place. And at the gathering, which I talked about earlier, that took place it's estimated that there's 2,000 people, 24 First Nations, and I imagine those were the chiefs, and that were gathered to meet with Johnson. So the approval process and the protocol to get to ask the Iroquois Confederacy whether they agree with this meeting, and then the meeting would go ahead and an invitation to all these other people from around the Great Lakes Basin and upper and lower Canada. To meet, as I said, they would meet with Johnson. And there was a number of what do you call it, people that were to be invited, and it is what do you call it? A lot of people did not trust Britain. They couldn't trust the British because they deemed it that the British were dishonest. So therefore, there had to be a level of confidence that had to be built into that, what do you call it, into the conference. One of the leaders that was very vocal was Pontiac, who said who expressed his dissatisfaction, if you will, about the meeting, and he concluded that the British could not be couldn't be trusted. What he outlined was that the British were after our land, so they can build their economy, and they wanted to run our lives the way that they saw fit. That was a roundabout way of saying this is what Pontiac said. Now, the actual speech or whatever, there's no access to that. So it is, I'll stop there. It is now 5 after 11. Washroom time. So I'll take a break there and then come back, say in 10 minutes. Carrie, is that acceptable?
Oh, absolutely. So 10 minutes, that will be, say, about 20 after 11.
Okay.
Sound good?
Good.
Mahau, miigwech. Everyone stay on.
Okay.
Hey, Carrie here. I see it's 11:20 on the dot, and I'm just looking through the chat here, and my buddy Zogdwin Anishinaabe is making some comments in there. I don't know if everyone had a chance to read, but during the presentation by Bentley earlier, 1764, we agreed to share the land and its resources. The 2,000 people ate muskrat for their meals. Wow. 70 winters later, they wanted to change the agreement. If Canada doesn't recognize the Royal Proclamation, then why did they continue to change it and make amendments on future treaties in their favor? And a notice needs to be served to the British Crown and its state of Canada for theft and lack of fiduciary responsibilities to uphold their side of the treaty agreement. Those are just some of the comments in our chat room, Bentley, if you didn't get a chance to see that.
Thank you. One thing that what they call them, we need to clarify is that Canada does not what they call it maybe just a misstated way of saying things. That Canada, one of its documents or founding documents in 1982, when the Constitution of Canada got repatriated to Canada, one of the constitutional documents that were adopted within that process, with the Royal Proclamation, pardon me, was one of the documents that was what they call it brought into the Constitution. And some of those things are reflected right now under Section 25 of the Constitution of Canada. The difference is that maybe I could clarify saying Canada accepts the Royal Proclamation. What they don't accept is the 1764 Treaty of Niagara. They don't accept that. Now, there could be a number of reasons why that happens. And because of the way who negotiated that treaty. Sometimes the government will say, well, it was not an act of Parliament to negotiate that they call it Treaty of Niagara, therefore we're not going to recognize it. And there's so many loopholes within the government process to be able to do it, for them to do it for convenience or omission, to take a position of that they don't accept any kind of documentation. So maybe there's a misunderstanding. The government of Canada adopts a position that the Royal Proclamation of 1764, whether they follow it or not, that's something else. They adopt that document, that's one of the founding documents, to have the Constitution of Canada. But they don't adopt the 1764 Treaty of Niagara as a founding document. We adopted as Aboriginal people as one of the documents. So it's a lot of things in history. I can't even make a list, or even attempt to make, where Canada always refers to its constitution as a basis of what do you call it, accepting things or rejecting things. And as an example, because of the treaties that exist today, they say, well, in order for them to accept that, they have to look at the Royal Proclamation. And the Royal Proclamation allowed the government of Canada to enter into a treaty with the Aboriginal people. Whether it's done, how it gets done, it doesn't say how it's going to get done, but it gives them the permission to proceed and go ahead and establish treaties with Aboriginal people. And that's how you got the treaty making process within Canada. And it is, we're going to start that process very, very quickly, go around back before we break for lunch. And I think it's a very important, what do you call it, to understand that the Treaty of Niagara, even though it talks about the Royal Proclamation, it's not recognized by Canada as a treaty. It doesn't recognize it as a treaty. So I hope I made it, help you determine there's two different documents and two different lots of idea how they fit into the process. For us as Aboriginal people, we recognize 1764 as one of the founding documents that establishes our relationship with the British Crown. We use that as one of in the arguments, as one of the documents, similarly with the Royal Proclamation, so on and so forth. So that's where we begin to differ, where things stand as far as what you call it. Don't forget, it was not the 1764 treaty of Niagara was put into place, but it was not until I assume some lawyers sitting around a table and saying, this is not a constitutional document. This was not something that was. Remember I talked about that order of how things are going to happen. Somebody reading all the plan saying, well, this 1764 treaty is not part of what we were supposed to do, therefore we're not going to recognize it. And I'm supposing, my own personal opinion, that's what happened. Because of the things that, other things that have happened in history where things were conveniently forgot about. And it is, it's one of those things. But we didn't forget about it. Because in many discussions, a lot of that came about. As an example, in the 1982 constitutional discussion for repatriating the Constitution of Canada, the discussion was brought out then. Government was reminded that what they had promised, and even to the point where they said the government never made those promises. Talked about it's a government representative that made those promises. So they conveniently deny certain things from happening. That happened, they completely denied that they happened, or they did not sanction those, what do you call it, the positions that were taken by individuals. You even had that in some of the treaties one we're going to be talking about this afternoon, the 1850 treaty. The treaty itself started to deviate from what was the work that was laid out, plan that was laid out, how to make treaties with Aboriginal people. And started to deviate from that and started allowing things to be put into the treaty that were not, what do you call it, that the government necessarily did not agree. But what ended up happening was that because these treaties were essential, when you start looking at putting a treaty in place, that there's timelines involved. And most of those timelines were like economics, trade, whatever. The demands of, what do you call it, the society became the factor in achieving treaty. So all those things, what they call it, start to play a role. And so conveniently, or by omission, the government would take a position that sometimes was outside of what was agreed to. And when Mary St. Clair talked about it, saying, well, when they talk about land, they said this is how land is going to be in the Royal Proclamation. This is how land is going to be in the future, how it's going to be handled. The government would be the first one to talk to Aboriginal people about their land. And they were going to buy the land if they had to, or make treaty so that they would have access to that land. Because the thinking of what they call it, of non-Aboriginal government people was, you stick a flag in the ground and it's mine. I'm trying to make it simple now. This land now is our land. It belongs to the King of England, so on and so forth. Forgetting that there are people living there. And when when those people living there, their own people living there, coming to confront them with the issue of encroachment and all that, it's like, okay, we're going to make treaty. We're going to make treaty and we're going to discuss how you are going to use the land. How are you going to use my land? Because I claimed it already on behalf of the king. I'll tell you a little story that sometimes comes in mind when I talk about it. There's an elder, Gary Pelche was his name here in the Fort William Reserve here in Thunder Bay. And there was a discussion around Hydro One having access to land to run hydro land through the community. Well, on the not right in the community, but on the side. And Hydro One said, well, we're going to give you, why don't we do a land exchange? But there was discussion about how that land exchange would take place. The land exchange, the hydro guy was talking about saying, is in the north end of the city. Well, and the piece of land, same amount of acres, so on and so forth, you can have in exchange for that land that's that we want for the hydro line through the Fort William Reserve, the outskirts of Fort William Reserve. Anyway, when the elder Gary Pelche said, stopped the guy from talking, he said, "Wait a minute, hold on." He said, "You know, you don't even know the way you're talking about the traditional territory of Fort William people. The way that you're explaining it, you're going to take my land. First of all, I got to give you land in exchange for land. So that's pretty straightforward. But where it becomes a little bit hazy and I don't understand it, I'm going to take my land on the north end of the city here and allow you to give it back to me. This does not make sense. And that's a lot of things that have happened. I'm sure a lot of Aboriginal people run into that. And without consultation or without even compensation, people just come and take things and say, well, because we don't understand, our people do not understand the legal system. You can take land as, what do you call it, Murray Sinclair said, you can take land away from us. And they continue to take land away from us anyway. They take the land that is belongs to Aboriginal people. They build a hydro line through, they take all that land they need, and they take ownership of that land. That's what Murray Sinclair's talking about. It is so, if we had somebody that can thoroughly think that through, and I'm sure there is probably somebody, will tell you what happened in, what do you call it, in Canada, even in Ontario, what has happened. So if you look at that and say, well, how is that, what do you call it, possible? Well, that's the legislative process in this country setting up to allow that to happen. This is gross encroachment of the land rights of our people. If you allow Ontario Hydro, as an example, to run a line through and you don't have an agreement for that, they assume ownership of that land. They'll say, well, we came to a meeting and we laid out our plan and you agreed to it, therefore that's how we proceed. It's an encroachment. And I just seen, call it a post here, somebody saying it's war crimes. Well, that's one way to describe it, yeah. And these are the grievances, I guess, that we carry and bring forward and say, well, we would like to, what do you call it, we are what some people are projecting us to be as a non-people. They just continue to do what they want to do. Well, you know, we say it's our land. And I mean, I'm not disputing that. I think that it's our land too. But I guess what I fail to see happening is that sooner or later, the landlord, which is what you are when you say this is my land. When is the landlord going to start acting like a landlord and stop this encroachment that's taking place? Our people. You know, we were relegated to the reserves. And they're even after that. So there's a thinking that the treaty put us on reserve. Once that happened, we don't own any of the land. They can do what they want. We have to start thinking more in a positive way to rightfully manage our own lands. You know, somebody will say, well, all you're interested about is getting money. Well, I hate to say this, but everybody else is getting money off my land. Why shouldn't I get some of that money? Not necessarily me, but our people. That is something that you got to think a lot about. Your link when you think about, like we are in Treaty 9, thinking about going to the table and with the government about reconciling the treaty and coming up with a revised agreement. We're not doing that to be, you know, the government and the general public will say, well, you gave up this land. I wish people would quit understanding that it wasn't done. We never gave up no land. Nobody did. No Aboriginal people that I know ever gave up their land. If anything came out of that system and allowed this treaty making to be in play. If somebody thought that we gave up the land, we never gave up the land. And we got to start acting like the landlord that we should be. Our needs as Aboriginal people are no different than anybody else. Look at what's going on in our communities, lack of housing, lack of this and that and whatever. We have to find a way to finance that. But how do you finance that sitting on the reserve? Getting a government program that's not sufficient to be able to do the job properly. So those are the things that matter to people in today's society, our people. And the message that's been brought to the other side is starting to understand that there's a real need there. Almost every single time that I'm aware of, I was keeping the community for 8 years, like I said before. Every time you want to do something, get some money, there's never enough to do what you want to do. It's almost as if you're put into a level of what do you call it? Somebody's decided that we're gonna bring you up to that level. And I can't prove what I'm telling you, but when I see it, it reflects on something. It reflects the government policy. It's almost like this. The government people, the bureaucrats in government, and I heard this from bureaucrats. Why should we give you 100% of the money to do a program when the government of Canada only gives us 80% and 20% is raised through taxes? Think about that, because it's important. That was not how we agreed. Things are going to happen in, what do you call it, in 1764, Treaty of Niagara. We agreed that we're going to go down the two paths. And one was not going to interfere with the other. In treaty, we agreed that we would know what was taken off our land. We would know how much money was taken off land. We would know how much gold was taken off. All the things. That never happened. We're never told how many. We know through government records how many trees are cut in here in each species, so on and so forth. But we don't know how much money there is. For all we know, we're paying for everything. Not because it's there's an agreement to that. Because someone had this notion that the treaty made them, for lack of a terminology, and they became God in Canada. They can do whatever they want with Aboriginal people. Maybe not God, but maybe the devil. I don't know. But it is important to know and to realize what significant contribution we have made in this country. First, we have to recognize that ourselves, and you know, people are going to say, prove it. We will prove it if we have to. We'll prove it. Because if you recall, way back when during the constitutional process, when they, Elijah Harper from northern Manitoba, and I forget what the name of the community is, stood up in the Manitoba legislature, and it required the unanimity. Everybody had to agree in East Lake Accord. That's the requirement. Everybody had to agree. And he was the only one as an Aboriginal person that got up and said no. He stopped that whole process. But we watch our leaders making these gains. And once they're done, we forget about them. If you look at the number of court cases that we have successfully put forward, and once we achieve that, they call it that what do we want it, and we dropped it like a hot potato. Never carrying on the work that needs to be done. Namely, because of the resources that we have. The resources that we have at our disposal. We couldn't sue the government. That was bought out yesterday when Ernie Sinclair said we couldn't sue the government or without their permission. And who's going to sue? Who's going to sue the government if the government says no, you can't sue me? We're going to have to start or commence, start putting our resources into defending our interests. You know, defending your interests is not about you have to join the organization that you have, the Anishinaabe Nation or whatever. Like ours is the Anishinaabe organization. That doesn't mean because you want to resolve the issues that you have to join that. You can be part of that, solving that issue. And that's important. Think about it. Because I think I, for one, think about it from this perspective that we can resolve issues with the government. Just think what Pontiac was trying to do. He tried hard to unite our people. We're still faced with the problem today. We're trying hard, some of us are trying hard to reunite our people. once we get united, then we can, what do you call it, fight a good battle in court or whatever to start putting things in place that's going to be good for us. And that's to me, that's part of what has been talked about in Truth and Reconciliation. You know, Truth and Reconciliation, people say, well, the government, what they do, they have a national day of reconciliation where they recognize things and so on and so forth. That's good. Truth and Reconciliation, and as I see, you have an individual or a group of individuals have to accept the truth. These things happen. Because you cannot have reconciliation if you don't accept the truth. That's what happens. It's a natural sequence of events. And we're sitting here talking about how we're gonna do things, and what you have ventured on is very, very important. This afternoon, we're going to talk about the Robinson-Superior Treaty. And there's going to be a presentation that's going to take approximately about 2 hours. And some of you may have knowledge of some of the things that were talked about through the how we passed our information from generation to generation. It was all oral. And some of you might have heard some things through that whole process that have, what do you call it, lent to this conversation. The Treaty of Robinson-Huron treaties, Robinson-Superior treaty, are, what do you call it, as a testament of how the continuation of that plan that started back in 1763. How that plan evolved in the, what do you call it, in the offices for government buildings. A group of people sat around the table and said, okay, this is how we're going to deal with treaty with Aboriginal people. And some people will tell me that's not what happened. Well, tell me what happened, and they can't. I'm putting that out there as a what do you call it, as a catalyst to begin to really talk about this treaty. No, it's we have to do it ourselves. And what I'd like to do is I'd like to break there, almost 12 o'clock, and then I'll go right into the Robinson Treaty this afternoon, and that's a presentation that's going to take about 2 hours, and you'll see how I'm sure I'm not going to be saying anything that you don't know already, but the bit of more of a background into how some of the events came about because people that influenced that process. Um, Individuals that played a role because how this disappeared. I mean, the Huron Treaty, how it also influenced the Lake Superior Treaty, and then also the number of treaties after that, because there might have been omissions, and I think that's some of the things that people are trying to talk about. How do we address those omissions, and how do we address things that we need to do? I'm not saying we're going to solve all our problems through this process. It's up to us to decide that. But how we do that is something that's going to be very important. And there has to be some trust put in our own people to get it done the way that we want to see it done. We can't get everything that we want, but I'm sure that we can do a lot better than what we're doing now. Because some of those things that have happened a long time ago are becoming a reality today. If you look at the programs that we have, child welfare, our people work in those systems. Policing, our people work in those systems. But we always have to talk about treaty in order to do that. That's not, it shouldn't be that way. Treaty only reminds us that we do have a right to have access to those programs. This is a norm for the country. Okay, so I'm going to break now, and then when you call it, we'll come back. I see there's some people on chat, and I'll talk about those things after lunch. If we take a break now, we'll come back 5 after 1.
Yep. A little after, yeah, 5 after 1. Yeah, it's 12:03.
Okay.
Now, okay, miigwech. We'll see you then.
Yeah.